Okay, microphone's on. Can you all hear me? All right, well, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to have you all here. To get us started, my name is Stephen Kenney. I'm the director of the Strategic Foresight Initiative program at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. I'm also the founder of a couple of consulting ventures, Foresight Vector, which works across sectors with organizations to help them envision their future and develop strategies for succeeding in the future, and White Label Impact, which works with nonprofits and foundations to help them work more effectively in implementing their missions. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I want to start by thanking the Dubai Future Foundation for this extraordinary convening that we're all part of this week, and for including this important topic in the agenda that we have here over these couple of days. I'd like to also thank all of you. It's a very rich agenda that you have before you today, and thank you for choosing to spend this time with us to talk about this topic. If any of you heard the opening remarks yesterday or the first of the afternoon plenaries, you heard about the global nature of this conference that we're at. There are people here from over 100 countries. And even if you weren't in either of those sessions, you needn't have heard that. You're experiencing that in all the conversations that you're having here over these couple of days. The topic we're here to talk about is also an extremely global reality. Just to provide some context, when we're talking about inequality, the top 10% of the population globally, the concentration of wealth is 76% of global wealth in the top 10% of the population, while the bottom 50% of the global population holds 1% of that wealth. If we think in terms of countries, the 10 richest countries on the planet collectively, again, have a concentration of about 76% of the world's wealth. And of course, we're not just talking about a rich nation and poor nation when we're talking about inequality. Inequality is a global phenomenon, and while the global north, global south divide is the most stark manifestation of global inequality, we know that inequality also exists in the wealthiest countries on the planet as well. My work has touched over time on some of the drivers of this inequality and some of the implications of it, but the panelists we have here today have spent their entire careers understanding those dynamics, understanding how to develop solutions for inequality at the strategic and operational and tactical levels, and leading efforts to do so. So I want to take a moment to thank them and to introduce each of them to all of you. Next to me is Nabil Abdo. Nabil serves as the Regional Influencing and Advocacy Manager at Oxfam in the Middle East and North Africa, and he leads Oxfam's advocacy efforts with the International Monetary Fund. Before joining Oxfam, Nabil worked with the International Labor Organization, where he supported unions across the Middle East, and with national and regional civil society organizations focusing on gender equality, development, tax, and social protection. Next to Nabil is Dr. Kyriacos Koupparis. Kyriacos is a leader in technology-driven solutions for food security and climate resilience. He's currently the head of Early Warning and Forecasting Unit at the UN World Food Program, where he leads a team using big data and AI to monitor food crises globally. Prior to his role there, he served at the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. State Department, directing programs that advance digital ecosystems in Asia and water-smart technology in the Middle East and North Africa. And next to Kyriacos, we have Khalid Alawadhi. He currently serves as the Registrar of Companies and the Director of Partnership and Membership at the Dubai Humanitarian Authority. His role there involves fostering innovation in the humanitarian sector and partnerships that contribute to the success of the humanitarian efforts throughout private sector collaborations, enhancing Dubai's and the UAE's regional and international humanitarian impact. Nabil and Kyriacos and Khalid, I want to thank all of you for making the time to talk with us today, and let's just get started. So in this session, we're going to talk about inequality and economic growth, and most importantly, we're going to talk about the future of inequality and economic growth. It's widely argued that inequality in societies has significant negative consequences, not only for the have-nots, but for the societies as a whole, and it's difficult to argue with that argument. It's also clear from considerable evidence that traditional models of economic growth are part of what has generated and exacerbated inequality around the world. What we want to talk about in this session is less about that historical and present reality and more about what different futures could look like and how we can create those futures. And I want to start the conversation. Nabil, let me start with you. There are a number of systemic issues that individually and in their interrelationships are at the root of inequality. Can you touch briefly on what some of those systemic issues are, and then reflect on what can we do in the future, perhaps that we have not done in the past, to get at the roots of those systemic issues and really think about systemic solutions that target those interrelationships? Can you hear him's mic? Can we get the mic here? Can we get the other handheld? Bear with us just a moment. Yeah, let's, in the interest of keeping moving along, let me start then with you, Kyriacos. You've worked for a number of years at the intersection of technology and innovation and data to address humanitarian inequality challenges. What are a couple of things you've seen, maybe things that you've been part of or things that you've observed elsewhere that have really stood out for you in the last few years in terms of the impact on the issues that you work on?
Great, thanks, Stephen. And yeah, I want to echo what you said and thank all of you for being here today. I know there's a lot of sessions here that are very exciting, so thanks for being here to hear us out.
Right.
And thanks to the Dubai Future Forum for hosting this important conversation. Can you all hear me, by the way? Yeah, okay. So yeah, Stephen, as you said, I've spent my entire career looking at how might we leverage technology and innovation to address global challenges. And there's definitely a lot of good that can come from that. We've seen access issues being mitigated by the clever use of technologies. For example, mobile banking has enabled access to financial services. We've seen online learning provide access to education in places where previously it did not exist. Telemedicine has afforded access to healthcare in many places where we operate and where I've worked prior to that. But I do want to emphasize that technology is not a silver bullet. It is not going to address the underlying systemic issues that have led to this inequality. At the World Food Program, we definitely take advantage of innovation and technology to maximize our impact. As you pointed out, I lead an effort to look at big data and AI so that we can become more proactive in our response. We utilize digital financial services to maximize the impact of our cash-based programming, etc. But underlying all of that is effectively structural and systemic issues that have led to this inequality in the first place. So while I do believe in the potential of technology, I do believe in the potential of innovation, we have to change the system on top of which these are developed. So how do we infuse concepts of equity and equality and inclusiveness in the design of these technologies in the first place? And we hear a lot of talk now about AI, it's the new big thing. And we see again here that extractive principles and inequities are actually perpetuated by these technologies. So while they do hold enormous promise, we do have to change the underlying economic system that is the incentive structure upon which many of these technologies are being built.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyriacos. Having referenced, as you did, the systemic issues, let me come back to you, Nabil, hopefully now with the benefit of technology, to talk a little bit about what some of those systemic issues are. And again, looking at the interrelationships of them, how can we think about systemic solutions that really target those interrelationships so we're not doing things kind of in a piecemeal manner?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you, everyone. So, I mean, for us, for Oxfam, we say that inequality is a policy choice. It happens by design, not by accident.
Yeah.
So in this sense, we believe that solutions to inequality are not technical. They're more political and systemic, as Kyriacos has been saying. So, and it is the result of unfair economic policies that have been, designed to benefit specifically the wealthiest in society, corporations, the most powerful, and all of that. And it is a result of decades of, coordinated and systematic attack and assault on the public sector, on progressive taxation, on tax structures, and on any kind of democratic ownership of economic decision making in countries. So when we see like privatization of public sector and all of that, and the slashing of tax rates to benefit corporations, etc., we arrive to this kind of situation, and it results in obscene wealth concentration. So just let me say a few numbers that I think that are very indicative. Like since 2020, 5 billionaires have doubled their wealth, while 5 billion people became worse off. And so billionaires over the world, not only 5, but all of them, are $3.3 trillion richer in the past 3-4 years. This is more than the GDP of France alone. And the issue of concentration of wealth is important because also it's about climate and climate breakdown. Because the richest 1% in the world, 77 million people, were responsible for 16% of global consumption emissions in the world. Only them alone. And in the MENA region, for example, the richest 1%, the top 1%, are responsible for 25% of emissions, while the bottom 50% of the population is only responsible for 6%. So wealth concentration is not only about equity, it's also about the consequence about, if you will, in climate breakdown and more problems. And the idea is the rest of us, we pay for these. So I know in this forum we heard a lot about the possibilities of humanity, but I think when it comes to inequality, I think it is really important to be aware that humanity as a collective, when we talk about inequality, is more a fiction. Is more a fictional community rather than a reality. For example, there are already climate resilient residents and infrastructure, residents and compounds being built, so rich people can shield themselves from any kind of climate consequences. So really, it's not about humanity. And even when we talk about technology, technology is and belongs to those who have wealth, whether in terms of countries or people. A lot of the technological innovation we see won't benefit most of humanity, and we know that. So it is where we sit on the hierarchical structures of power, where we benefit from all this, or we suffer from it, or this technology is used to extract more profit from us. So having said that, in terms of solution, so I will have to disappoint you, Stephen, in the sense that a lot of the solutions that are for inequality, like I said, are political, but also they are also from the past, if we can say so, in the sense that a lot of the solutions that really tackle inequality have been rendered or considered obsolete by the hegemonic economic thinking that governs our world. But it's worth to go back, in a sense, to what we know, because these solutions worked in the past and they can work in the future as well. So first is about regaining, democratic economic decision making. This means revitalizing the state and the public. It means the state has to play a major role in economics and in the distribution of wealth and income. So in a sense, the government should ensure universal provision of free, quality healthcare and education, and also bring publicly delivered goods and public options in sectors like energy, like transportation, like medicine, etc. All of that. So in a sense, the state should be a central actor in this and bring back the state after it has been effectively decimated. Second, we need to rein in on corporations and the super rich. So also this includes, breaking up monopolies, also addressing the issues of democratizing patent rules, and also means legislating for workers to have, a living wage, capping CEO pay, capping the disparity in wages within companies, new taxes on the super rich, and also on excess profit, etc. So, for example, we estimate that the wealth tax on the world's millionaires and billionaires could generate $1.8 trillion in a year. So this could be used to reduce inequality. Third, and I haven't talked about this much, but we can talk about it later, is that the poorest countries, for example, are now spending 4 times on debt service So 4 times more repaying their debt than they're spending on education, on health. So countries in the global south, also in order to be able to reduce inequality, they need a breathing space so they can spend on their people. This means massive cancellation of debt that is choking many of the countries in the global south, but this also is possible with meaningful and serious reforms of the international economic governance systems as well. So it's an interrelated, set of solutions that I think, and like I said, it's not always about, thinking what haven't worked what did work in the past. It's important to see how we can learn from the past in order to implement what we need to implement to reduce inequality. And maybe I'll stop here, and I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I mean, one of the important things I heard you saying there is that we don't necessarily, I mean, we do need new ideas, but we don't necessarily only need new ideas, that if we create the right conditions, that, the old can be new again. And I also didn't really hear you say very much about technology. To your point, Kyriacos, it's not a technology solution, it's a policy solution, it's a political solution, and technology can help with that, but it's not the answer in and of itself.
Exactly.
Khalid, let me turn to you. Dubai Humanitarian has done and continues to do a great deal to support all the international organizations that are operating out of Dubai to help them in their work on the initiatives that they are doing throughout the region, throughout the world, that target aid and target empowerment on those who are suffering from inequality. If you think back over the last couple of years, how have you seen the support that they need evolve and change that will help them, that has helped them be successful in implementing those initiatives? And if you look out a couple of years, how do you see those support needs evolving even further?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for the attendees for making time to be here at the panel. What I would be speaking of more is how Dubai Humanitarian has focused on making sure that the international organizations get the support that they required in order to respond to the emergencies the fastest and more efficient way in the past 21 years. I mean, the establishment of Dubai Humanitarian was back in 2003. We went through a shift, of course, in terms of the name of the organization that was used to be called International Humanitarian City, and today is Dubai Humanitarian. Now, what we've seen over the past years is that the requirement and the need of the international organizations has dramatically increased. The support that's required by these agencies and organizations has increased. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we cater to that requirement based on why this organization has been founded in the first place. And we know exactly that we need to focus on what we're good at. We've set up the whole international city in order to create the largest humanitarian hub as of today. We are hosting the international agencies' aid and materials in order for these agencies to be able to respond to the emergencies at the fastest possible in order to save lives. And this is the main reason, or one of the main pillars of why the authority was created in the first place. Looking back at the numbers of the past few years, I mean, in 2017, the aid and material and stock that was stored at Dubai Humanitarian was worth of around $45 million US. We've seen a dramatic increase in the past 5-6 years to over 200 million USD. And that increase has come, unfortunately, naturally, because of the increase in number of disasters and number of, the effect of climate change that we have seen over the past years, and unfortunately, the conflicts that's happening in the region on the international level also. What we understood is that we need to focus on providing the support. It's a very negative environment. You know that when you see that the catastrophes are increasing and the problems are increasing in the region and internationally, what you need to do, I think, from the perspective of focusing on what the future looks like. And if we keep on looking at the numbers, unfortunately, it is a negative number. The deficit is increasing, unfortunately, as we look at it today. But we understand that focusing rather on solutions as per what Dubai Humanitarian is providing today and as per what the humanitarian organizations are performing in terms of activities, we require to continue providing that support. And we know that no matter how difficult it becomes, the more support that you provide in terms of facilities, in terms of accessibility, in terms of being more efficient in providing the support to the humanitarian community will always contribute to saving lives and creating stability in different regions and different areas. And I believe this is where Dubai Humanitarian has put its focus over the past years. And the humanitarian community has requested to expand this presence at Dubai Humanitarian because of the type of support that they have seen on different levels. The discussions that take place between Dubai Humanitarian's organizations that we are hosting today and decision makers plays a very important role here in order to move those stocks and aid without looking at any red tape that might hinder that assistance. And this is where we see our strength is, and this is why the community has continued growing by having the right experienced people in the field, such as the colleagues that we have here at the panel today. And we look at where we can really make sure that our support will play a vital role in responding to these emergencies and creating the stability in different regions. Looking back also at the numbers, and we have seen that unfortunately the health and stock of the health stock has increased from around 5 million back in 2017 to over 60 to 70 million USD, and that's just the health stocks and aid. Wow. COVID played a very vital role, basically, in the increase in pre-positioning for these organizations. But we thought that those numbers will be reducing after the period of COVID-19. But what we have noticed is that through the numbers and through data, that number has dramatically also increased over the years. So when you look at the numbers, and what we depend on here in decision making is that Dubai Humanitarian has created a platform which is hosted by Dubai Humanitarian, but it hosts the information of the major agencies that are providing the assistance on the international level. It's called the Humanitarian Logistics Data Bank. We rely on data because big data, as the colleagues here mentioned in the panel with Dr. Kyriacos, is that plays a vital role in decision making and knowing exactly how to prepare ourselves for the future. Yes, we don't know how the future will be, but we know very well that the numbers will give you a better prediction of what you need to prepare, how you need to be more prepared than we saw during COVID. I think no one was prepared of the future. No one was ready to understand what might COVID-19 pandemic hold and how you need to be prepared for it. But the numbers showed that if you pre-position in different locations, you have a better chance in responding to these emergencies in a faster pace, in a better pace, where people really need help in different regions and in different areas. And this is where Dubai contributed and became, instead of closing its area, it became an open net to really provide the countries, the humanitarian organizations, the support that they required during the most difficult time I think humanity has seen in the past 20, 30 years, I think, with the pandemic period. That showed how it's important to really be well prepared, well positioned. I mean, part of what Dubai Humanitarian growth is and how important the hub is today is that we combine the right minds, we combine the right organizations, we speak to organizations and expertise in order to really be able to provide the assistance that's required on the level of these organizations, because we understand very well that they are the ones who implement the work on ground. What we do from an authority perspective is that we make sure that we listen and we act upon the right information from expertise. And this is where you find better solutions, I think, for responding to emergencies, and this is where the focus is for Dubai Humanitarian in the past years. I think I will stop from here. I will stop at this point, and we'll continue with you, Stephen.
Great. Well, thank you. I think you've touched on a number of interesting points. I think your point about the data bank, I think brings us back to technology. I think we tend to think about technology innovations as like, what is some new thing that we've never done before, that with technology that can sort of create a solution that never existed before. But just the sheer usage of data, knowing where the needs are, what the needs are, where and what we have, and bringing those things together is an important use of technology that's very simple but powerfully important.
True.
I have a question I'd like to pose to all three of you and sort of have each of you, from your own experience, your own observations, your own perspectives, answer the same question, and kind of in the spirit of looking to the future and how we can create a future that's different from the reality that we're grappling with today when it comes to inequality. I want to go back to a point from our opening framing for this discussion, that historical and traditional models of economic growth have been an important contributor to and exacerbator of the inequality that all three of you are working with in your organizations. So given that, in what ways do you think that the current paradigms of economic growth could evolve and could be changed to address inequality in different ways while still respecting planetary boundaries? In other words, what could different future economic growth models look like? And then if time allows, we can talk about what some of the steps might be to implementing those new economic growth models. If I could maybe, Kyriacos, ask you to start in answer to that question.
Sure, thanks, Stephen. Maybe let me just build upon a few points that both Nabil and Khalid mentioned. We definitely cannot continue business as usual, right? We all acknowledge that, and all the statistics you mentioned are quite stark. I also want to acknowledge, as Khalid mentioned, the support that Dubai Humanitarian has provided has been increasing, and we are very thankful for that support. But we cannot outrun the current system. So fundamentally, we have to redesign it, right? And then I look out here, and we have a big group of futurists that are thinking about what does the future look like. And fundamentally, our economic model is not fit for purpose. And I won't repeat all the statistics that Nabil mentioned, but it is evident. And so we need to shift to a model that puts human well-being at the center. We need to shift to a model that prioritizes investments in public services, whether that's education, healthcare, transport. And we need to shift to a model that fairly distributes income and opportunity. And I know there's a lot of debate of what that looks like, and whether it's taxation, whether it's universal basic income. The how doesn't really matter as long as the design principle is agreed to. We fundamentally have to reshift the way that we operate as an economic system globally to one that prioritizes people and planet, right? So everything that we do currently is all for GDP growth. And I think that has been an oversimplistic model that has led to a lot of progress, but at a huge economic and human cost. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Khalid, let me ask you the same question.
I would, I agree with what you mentioned, Doctor, but from the perspective of the humanitarian operations that we manage at Dubai Humanitarian, we look at the future as in, if we invest in sustainability, if we include the private sector in terms of finding solutions for responding to emergencies, making sure that when you respond to emergency, it's not just the immediate solution that you're providing today or just on an immediate action. We make sure that we look from our perspective in terms of logistical operations. This is where our focus is at Dubai Humanitarian, is that we try to involve the private sector. We are looking at also involving the academia in order to look for solutions that probably the experts that are in the field don't have time to look at and dedicate their time to for that benefit, basically. We've involved academia, we've involved entrepreneurs, we've involved also the sustainability mechanism in order to find the right solutions for implementing the right solutions for different areas and different contexts. And this is what Dubai Humanitarian is trying to do here, because we're not humanitarian implementers on the ground, but we look at the laws, the regulations, and what can assist these organizations in order to respond more effectively. We understand that even donors today are hesitant to look at the gap which has been increasing in the humanitarian sector. So you don't find organizations today speaking of, you know what, I've had enough and you've provided us enough support that I don't need anything anymore. Unfortunately, that gap is increasing today in terms of responding to emergencies. And what donors are looking at today is that how can we look at sustainable solutions? If you're implementing a project, if emergency is one case, but again, looking at development projects, more of an investment rather than spending money that has no actual returns on the longer term. So even donors today are looking at finding the right solutions in order for that gap to be closed down as much as possible. Again, it's never late to start that procedure. The academia today, we've had a few examples very recently, is that they provide a lot of solutions in terms of, even simple packaging solutions for humanitarian organizations, looking at sustainable packaging solutions, which is something that has taken place over the past 50, 60 years that no really look into the details has been done into that perspective. And this is one small element of what we have seen, that the academia has provided solutions there in order to look at sustainable packaging solutions, which is something that we presented very recently at COP29 in Baku, which is academia and students themselves looking at practical solutions for the private sector to adopt, for the private sector to look into and provide to the humanitarian actors. And if you provide solutions, then you require further investment to look at these solutions in order for them to be implemented on ground. And such an example is really important, because as experts or as people working in the humanitarian context today, sometimes you look at the laws and regulations and the things that really embed you from thinking outside the box. And we know that students do think outside the box because they don't have these kind of restrictions that embed them from looking at solutions which could be very simple, but at the same time very hard to think of during whatever operational context that they look at and the emergencies. So they're really caught up in that moment. So getting out of that box becomes kind of difficult, but it needs to be looked into. So we look at these kind of collaborations that will provide us the right solutions probably, or the best alternative solutions to what happens today in the context of humanitarian operations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And I think the idea of turning to people who are not burdened by the solutions of the past to come up with the solutions of the future is a really important element for how we think about this. Nabil, let me give you a couple minutes on the same question. What could a future model of economic growth look like that addresses inequality in a way that gets at some of the systemic issues that you started our conversation with? And then we'll leave the rest of the time for questions from you all in the audience.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So, so let me say first that a future economic model or alternative model that respects planetary boundaries and reduces inequality, first, it's a model that should not allow the existence of billionaires. That's one thing, in the sense that extreme wealth, obscene wealth concentration should not be happening in this kind of model, because then we would have redistribution, we would have guardrails against this, etc. But it entails a radical transformation of economic thinking, of economic systems, and it's more complex or more meaningful than just going beyond GDP, than measuring other stuff. Because now what is being presented in front of us, that now we should measure other stuff than GDP, then things will be better. But it's even beyond that, because we cannot rely on how things are being done right now, in the sense that it's a world driven by profit-seeking corporations, by profiteering of wars, profiteering of disasters. Like I was saying before, like for example, the COVID pandemic has been disaster for most of us, and then we had COVID billionaires, like more billionaires coming in, and more the big pharmaceutical companies, racking up profit, etc. So this system should not exist in this way. So it means, like Kyriacos was saying, in a sense, like a massive and radical redistribution of income and wealth, but it's also reimagining our economies. In a sense, it's also where we put value, right? Mm-hmm. It is how we value, it is fully accounting and valuing, for example, women's unpaid work, care work, all those sectors that are maybe that are undervalued, like education, health, etc., and care, are really important so we can put more value on it and challenge economic orthodoxy that we have seen. But also it's also about reimagining or reforming the international, like I said, the international economic governance. Like for example, you know, here, like when we talk about this issue, sometimes you forget, you know, the different parts of it, like people, but also countries, is that we have a lot of countries that are facing, you know, debt crisis right now, right? So, and a lot of countries, most countries, if I want to say, most countries in the world who are not rich, don't have much economic decision making. They don't have much decision making on what they can spend on nationally, how they can design their tax systems, because they're already tied by international economic rules and by, you know, by creditors, by austerity measures. So we have countries that are facing impossible choices. Either I spend on my people, or I spend on my people and then I piss off the creditors, right? Or I do what the creditors want, so I can so I can finance my economy through austerity, through lending, etc., and all of that. So they are in chains. They are shackled by this kind of choices, and these kind of choices are made. You know, the international economic system is being shaped a lot by institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, where there we have what we call the $1, one vote system, where countries are not equal. So in this sense, we need a radical transformation of this kind of international economic governance. So it's different layers, and I repeat, it's not about technological solutions. It's not about whether we have you know, better predictions of the future, etc. Because inequality is a political problem. It's about social dynamics. It's about dynamics of power. It's about these kind of relations. And these kinds of relations are human. They are not solved by technology. It's solved by political will, by the movements of people, you know, and by how much capital is willing to concede to labor and to other kind of power. So to conclude, I mean, I think going beyond GDP is not just a slogan. We should say it explicitly. Capitalism is not working, or it shouldn't be. It shouldn't stay, because otherwise we're all doomed. Because we cannot respect planetary boundaries with this kind of system. So we need to reshape economic thinking and the economic system as well to be centered around, you know, equality, human well-being, and planetary health. So yeah, and of course we should reject the tenets of the current system. Otherwise, we're just, you know, moving in circles and just talking. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think what you've described, I think, really brings us back to the theme that this panel is being, you know, convened under, right? Transforming humanity. We're talking about transforming the institutions and the mechanisms under which humanity has pursued economic growth in the first place, so that it can get to a different outcome. Yeah. So we have about 5 or 7 minutes left. I'm sure there are questions from the audience that some of you may have already had before you came in the room. Maybe some others have been stimulated by what we heard. Do we have a floating mic that we can bring around? Questions from anyone? Raise a hand. We've got a question here in the front, very front row. And you can pose it to any one of the panelists, or to the panel as a whole. The mic is coming around to you from this way.
Thank you.
That one works.
First of all, thank you for a really cool and engaging session and topic. I think I wanted to go back to, we talked a lot about like systems of inequality, right? And one of the underlying causes, I guess, or is that with structural inequality, like when we're removing the rich getting richer, and you gave us some really interesting data about the billionaires getting richer and all that. One of the issues that sometimes people say is that there's a distrust of institutions and governments, and we're seeing that a lot in sort of the rise of, say, the right wing across the West, etc. So that's one of the reasons, as like, you know, the right-wing ideologies where it's slashing these taxes, etc., and putting money more in capitalism and trusting the capitalist system to, you know, solve that. But what your stats are showing the opposite. So what can you tell us about how can we trust governments, institutions, etc., that if we give them more funds, give them more taxation, that it will help address those inequalities? Thank you. think the
Any of
question.
you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I can touch briefly. So yeah, I think this trust in institutions and in government is because of this. I think it's the same issue because, I mean, if you see how this mistrust has been sowed over the years, you know, especially if you're, depends also on which countries you are talking about. But basically, the distrust in government is because government policy and that has been tailored in a sense to benefit a specific sector of society. Because like I said, over the past decades, 40 years if you want, you can go more, the role of government has shifted very radically in a sense that government, instead of providing services, instead of acting to reduce inequality by redistribution, etc., they have been doing the opposite. And then when we see governments who has their ear, it's more the wealthiest in society and not everyone. So this kind of reversal to the far right or whatever we're calling it in Europe, in the US, etc., is exactly because governments over the past 30, 40 years have pursued neoliberal orthodoxy on the expense of people. So there's no trust, and then what the people are voting for those who are considered outside the system, because they see the system is only bringing them more and more hardship. It doesn't mean the people they are voting for are the alternative, of course not. But this is how politics is. So this shift that we've been seeing is one of the most starkest and loudest indication that we need to stop what we have been doing for the last decades and to really radically change economic policy and radically change what governments are supposed to be doing, like providing services, like providing power, transportation, all of this. That's why we need to bring back the government as and the service of the people, and the economy is in service of the people, as in opposition to what we have now, where people are in the service of the economy.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Someone here in the middle?
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. There's been a lot of focus on changing the economic model, but do you think there needs to be more of a focus on educating the younger generation, the future decision makers, in changing their mindset, in how they perceive capitalism, how do they perceive success to reduce inequality?
Kyriacos?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. I'll go back to what Nabil said, right? That fundamentally inequality is a societal issue, right? And it's a design principle. It's built into the system that we have, and so I think education is a big part of that. If we all grow up in a society where we value community, where we value connection, where we value equality, where that is actually the basis of what we strive for, and unlike some of the incentives that we currently grow up in, I think that'll definitely have a big difference. I do also want to infuse a bit of optimism into the room, because I know that a lot of what we've talked about has been quite stark, and that just is the reality that we live in today. But I think fundamentally, if we look historically, organizing people around common cause has been the only way that change has come about, right? And we saw this, at the turn of the last century in the US, for example, with the robber barons and the disruption of those systems. The Great New Deal brought in essential services to millions of people. So there are many examples where change has happened for the better. Even today, there are many countries that are heading in the right direction, and not necessarily just rich ones. For example, if you look at Costa Rica, it has much less prosperity than the US, but on health and education outcomes, it is on par with the US, right? So there are models out there that we can look to, but it will take involvement from all of us. And until we get there, there will be a lot more suffering. And again, going back to what Khalid was saying, we are very thankful that we do have the support of Dubai Humanitarian and many, many other donors and supporters, because it's going to take decades to get to a system that addresses inequality. And until we get to that point, unfortunately, we will need humanitarian organizations to help the most poor and the vulnerable in the meantime. So I guess the bottom line is we will get through the other end because we have to. As Nabil said, we have no other choice. But the question we have to all ask ourselves is at what cost and to who? And fundamentally, it's the poor and vulnerable that will bear the brunt of our current system as they currently are.
Thank you, and I want to take a moment to shine a light on that question. And another one of the themes of this conference is empowering generations. And it's important for us to think about not just empowering the current young generation and the next generations, empowering them in the current paradigm, but empowering them with educational opportunities that don't burden them with learning the traditional paradigms, but rather give them the opportunity to learn about new ways of thinking about success and growth and what those might mean. I think we have time for one last question, and then we'll need to break. How about over here?
Hi, thank you very much for the session. My question is, if you consider everybody in the room as real, tangible multipliers to transform humanity, what is one message you would leave us all with? Thank you.
That's a great way to wrap us up. Maybe like a lightning round quickly from each of you.
I mean, I'm not an expert in giving final sentences or guiding anyone here, but I would say is that what we have noticed, I think, over the past years. I'm not a humanitarian. I mean, I'm a person that works in this field and tries to provide certain expertise to make the system work in terms of doing whatever we can for the humanitarian organizations for them to commence their work on ground. But what we realize really here is that if we partner and we collaborate and we bring all the minds together in order to look for what's best for humanity in general, taking into consideration, removing all the procedures and processes that might hinder from us reaching that level, I think we will come with a better outcome that serves everyone in this room. Policies are always going to be there. They need to be looked at. Certain processes and procedures that is needed by organizations, whether it's for commercial purpose or for non-professional purpose, it will always be there. A system has to be put in place because we can't work without systems. We can't work without having a bottom line to report to make sure that the information is correct, and so on. But if the purpose and the discussion takes place in the right way between all organizations, we're speaking here today in Dubai Humanitarian with academia, we're speaking with youth, we're speaking with entrepreneurs, we're getting involved also the humanitarian experts, and we have the private sector and philanthropies also involved in this decision making. Not forgetting that decision makers in terms of government involvement is also plays a very important role here. And this is why Dubai Humanitarian across the past years has been able to provide the humanitarian organizations with the support. The model that has been put in place here, the Dubai model of Dubai Humanitarian, is very unique. It's not something that can be copied immediately and implemented anywhere around the world because of you involving all the right elements together, starting from the highest authority till the ground workers basically that really implement the work on ground. That model is available, and Dubai Humanitarian offers this model for any country or any authority that wants to benefit from. So if it's something that you see that is really beneficial, we've seen definitely that it's been beneficial over the past years, or the organizations would have not required to really participate and have it as a humanitarian base in responding to emergencies. That's the number one priority. But again, it's an area where discussions and collaborative efforts really makes a difference on the international level. And this is where we see the value of what we are proposing at Dubai Humanitarian today. The future forum here today speaks of how we see the future in different perspectives, in different ways, from every element that is important here. And we understand that the humanitarian future is a collective matter, that everyone has a contribution to add in with this. This is my humble opinion. I could be right, and of course, I learn from the expertise of the colleagues here and from whoever is in the audience, but we really need to work together for fostering a better future for the next generations to come.
Well, thank you. I think that's a great note to end on. I've been told we're out of time, so I want to thank you all again for taking the time to join us in this session. And that is a wrap for this. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Thank you.